Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. My article over the weekend was headlined "At the Moment of Vision, the Eyes See Nothing." I have found as I've gotten older that time and even the world simply does not move in a linear fashion. I too, like all of you I'm sure, am waiting for that magic pill which will reverse time and give me back my 21-year-old body, which of course was an Enzo Ferrari, and which I surely in a folly of youth did not appreciate at the time, and instead coveted the car, which was nothing. Yuval Noah Harari leads us to believe that the arrival of such a pill that will reverse time cannot be that far away. I would like to keep my more mature mind and not get back that testosterone-fueled mind machine of old, however. A lot of folks will have read The Lord of the Flies, which is a 1954 novel by Nobel Prize-winning British author William Golding. The book focuses on a group of British boys stranded on an uninhabited island and their disastrous attempt to govern themselves, not unlike the post-Brexit vote United Kingdom. However, fewer folks will have read William Golding's book, The Spire. And in that book, Golding writes, "At the moment of vision, the eyes see nothing." The moment of vision is in essence a non-linear thing. It's a moment of deep insight. The President of the United States of America, currently undergoing an impeachment process at the hands of nervous Nancy Pelosi, his moniker, which probably is a linguistic transference of a sort, and whom Speaker Pelosi and not the Trumpster I find sexy, but that's a discussion I have to have with my wife, was booed for the second consecutive weekend. This weekend he was booed at a UFC 244 event at Madison Square Garden. Pollice verso, or verso pollice, is a Latin phrase meaning with a turned thumb that is used in the context of gladiatorial combat. It refers to the hand gesture or thumb signal used by ancient Roman crowds to pass judgment on a defeated gladiator. The Madison Square UFC 244 verso pollice moment is a Shakespeare-level moment for President Trump, and of more import than the impeachment process because impeachment is political and therefore the outcome should split on party political lines. The Republican Party will be making a hard-nosed political calculation this weekend that if the president is getting booed at a UFC event, the base is lost. Vice President Pence, who is an evangelical Christian and is in the habit of praying with another evangelical Christian and Nobel Prize winner far away in Addis Ababa, allegedly, is the coming man, and this could happen real quick. At the moment of vision, the eyes see nothing. Staying with the US, we learned last week that the US national debt crossed $23 trillion, having gained $1.3 trillion in just 12 months. US stock indices posted fresh record highs. This is now unhinged. I recall sitting in the offices of a gentleman called Julian Robertson in the 1990s. Robertson founded Tiger Management, one of the earliest hedge funds. Robertson is credited with turning $8 million in startup capital in 1980 into over $22 billion in the late 1990s. And I met him at the apogee, and subsequently Mr. Robertson bet just about everything on shorting the NASDAQ. And the story goes like this: the NASDAQ stayed irrational and even got more irrational longer than he could stay solvent. Of course, he was right, and the NASDAQ subsequently crashed in what was characterized as the dot-com bubble. The point is this: we can see the dislocation, we can smell the stink of it. Think WeWork's Neumann admittedly never made it to the public markets, but timing it is both an art and a science. And always remember, the entire paraphernalia of the financial markets and its entire raison d'etre is there to prevent the bubble bursting. The elastic band will snap because we are in voodoo territory, but when? And will it inflate further before snapping? And what will happen in the moment of the snapping? And make no mistake, everyone is riding the wave. It's all hocus pocus. Xi's China is in a similar fix and fully loaded with debt. I came across this in an article in War on the Rocks. Once Xi becomes weak, sick, old, or dies, various interests within China will likely have a weakened institutional ability to deal with the distribution of interests and managing factional rivalry. The Ministry of Sound, my concept for ministry was purely this: 100% sound system first, light second, design third, in that order, the reverse of everyone else's idea. 4AA people, otherwise known as the Bitcoin evangelists, will of course all be screaming, Ali Khan, just buy Bitcoin, it's going to 50,000, 100,000, a million. Last week they all got carried away when Xi apparently gave Bitcoin his imprimatur. It took China about 3 days of being officially interested in blockchain to make their intentions clear. Transparent, panopticon, immutable, social credit dystopia. Nick Carter. All you people that are ready to forsake all of your values for the sake of riding some authoritarian-driven pump, I want nothing to do with you, Nick Carter. I don't believe in the goddamn underlying technology. I believe in the freedom that the technology gives us from autocrats and dictators, Nick Carter. It matters because people are interpreting it as validation of permissionless blockchains when it represents a perversion and corruption of those ideals, Nick Carter again. Not to mention the ability to shut off access to anyone on the system with a flip of a switch. A 21st century authoritative government's dream rhythm trader. The terrifying reality of a cashless society, Madvillian. I am of the view that Bitcoin and crypto is a Jeffrey Edward Epstein and his cast of characters level con, and I'm having nothing to do with it, other than occasionally looking in and admiring the sophistication and the level of the con. It is breathtaking. The most referenced poem today is W.B. Yeats's The Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. It's easy to see why. William Golding, for the quote, "At the moment of vision the eye sees nothing," is from the Spire, which is a dark and powerful portrait of one man's will and the folly that he creates. Pangal, the lame and impotent caretaker, reports that the workmen employed to build the spire torment him and warns that one day they will kill me. Jocelyn fails to do anything of note to help him. Pangal begs him to send them away, but Jocelyn only requests that the master builder speaks to his men and asks them to stop bullying Pangal. It appears later that Pangal's prediction is correct, although Jocelyn's description of the event is far from conclusive as he watches the workmen chase Pangal near the pit. He saw men who tormented Pangal, having him at the broom's end. In an apocalyptic glimpse of seeing, he caught how a man danced forward to Pangal, the model of the spire projecting obscenely from between his legs. Then the swirl and the noise and the animal bodies hurled Jocelyn against stones so that he could not see, but only hear how Pangal broke. Le Figaro published a photograph from inside Notre Dame shortly before the roof collapsed as molten lead fell into the nave. That's from Richard Waghorn. This is Donald Trump arriving to protests in NYC at the Garden. Check out the signs he saw on the way. That's from Justin Hendricks. This is a photograph of Trump's reaction to being booed at the UFC 244 event in New York City. This is the painting Pollice, verso 1872 by Jean-Léon Gérôme. This is a photograph of the UFC. Trump has arrived at Madison Square Garden after a motorcade ride through New York. That's from Andrew Restuccia. Robertson, of course, the founder of Tiger Management, one of the earliest hedge funds. Raf Kadian, some traders have been waiting for the crash for 10 years. Others tell you the trend is your friend. Its official US debt is now $23 trillion. The US crossed that threshold on October the 31st. There's a link to the Ministry of Sound, which is somewhere which I know about because I visited it on a number of occasions. Free costume idea for the fellas panicking about a look for tonight. Jared Kushner's iconic blazer flak jacket look. And there's a link to Nick Carter's thread where he said it took China about 3 days of being officially interested in blockchain to make their intentions clear. Transparent, Panopticon, immutable, social credit dystopia. Let's turn to macro thoughts. This is the 12-month spot returns versus the euro. A lot of African currencies in there. That's from the market ear. Home thoughts. He has refused to denounce whites. He has refused to join the noisy chorus which prides itself in manufacturing racial polarization. He is far-sighted enough, believes in the inclusive South Africa, my captain, our leader. This is the captain of the South African Springboks, who's really turned out to be an extraordinary individual. He's captured that Nelson Mandela 1994 mood I've spoken about previously, when Mandela walked out of prison blinking in the sunlight, constructed his Rainbow Nation. You remember that photograph with Pienaar, who I saw was at the match as well. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure, Nelson Mandela. There is no passion to be found playing small in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. That hit kind of set the tone for the game. What a great photograph from Fundi Mugai, who shared it with me. A beautiful picture indeed. Hervé Gogo sharing the victory photograph. And then the Springboks themselves, they played a beautiful game. Stronger together, they tweeted, and indeed. And if you've got a second, watch Pollice finding England players to show his respect after a grueling 80 minutes of rugby. It really was tremendous to watch. The Financial Times has a super article called The Sex and Drugs of the Rock and Roll Memoir. People tend to have a fairly specific idea of what they can expect from a musician's autobiography. Excess, smashed up hotel rooms, mountains of drugs, the requisite number of naked men and women. Rod Stewart's fantastic book had the drugs and the women, how could it not, but was actually most involving when he was mocking himself, and most moving when he was talking about his love of model railways. In the 1990s, with the growth of the heritage rock industry driven by the CD boom and magazines such as Mojo, rock memoirs began to flourish. I commend to you David Lee Roth's 1998 book, Crazy from the Heat, which is entirely untrustworthy and completely fabulous. I love Just a Gigolo. While their memoirs theoretically have more in common with sports stars' books than anything else, the same firework trajectory through extreme fame at a young age, they end up being unlike those books. While the most fascinating events in a sports star's life tend to be the biggest ones, the Olympic gold medal, the Tour de France victory, precisely because they are the most dramatic. The period of greatest success is really the most dramatic part of a musician's life. It's the time when they are most isolated from the world, from their friends, when what ties a band together frays under the strain of drugs, drink and jealousy. Every day becomes the same: hotel, travel, venue, soundcheck, show, hotel, which means there's little to say about any of those days. Elton John is particularly good on his vertiginous rise. On page 81 alone, he manages to shame Liberace by not being present when the pianist calls him on stage because he's coming out to his parents, then infuriates his neighbours when Neil Young comes over at 2 a.m. to deliver a live voice and piano rendition of the yet as unreleased Harvest album. And so book after book follows the same trajectory, a brilliant start derailed by the grim necessity of detailing the big tours and how they made the hit albums, usually in a manner distinctly lacking the passion of their descriptions of their rise. Anderson follows Suede's biggest hits by upgrading his recreational habits to full-blown heroin addiction. My understanding of the world was ever narrowing to the epicenter of the glass-topped table around which my friends and I permanently perched as we conducted our obsessive new duties, like devout acolytes attending to a shrine. John is more fun about his imperial phase, no matter that it involved a descent into cocaine usage so deep, as he puts it, that my appetite for the stuff was unbelievable, enough to attract comment in the circles I was moving in, given that I was a rock star spending a lot of time in 1970s LA. This was a not inconsiderable feat. He concludes an anecdote about trying to pick up men at Studio 54 when zonked on cocaine with the observation, "It's hard to conjure up a seductive mood when your eyeballs are pointing in different directions, and it takes you 3 attempts to successfully navigate your way through the exit." Talks about Prince, one of the most extraordinary musicians pop culture ever produced. Never get to read his love story. It's not the romantic love for a life partner, but the love between people who discover that when they come together they create something extraordinary. Talking about music book I've read that comes with a map, Before We Was We, of Kentish Town in North London and the surrounding area. It shows how closely tied to the district madness are. As much as anything, the book is a social history of growing up on the edges of criminality in what was then a poor part of the capital. There are stories of stealing scooters, of looting gas meters and the money tins in laundrettes, of fights and police cells and court appearances. Nothing is paid for. The principals bunk into gigs and to films. Records are nicked from shops foolish enough to keep them in their sleeves. When they want to see somewhere other than Kentish Town, they would climb onto a railway bridge and jump onto a freight train. And sometimes they would board freight trains for other reasons. Then, looking at Suede, we started to play small, iconic London venues, always ensuring that they were dangerously oversold, heaving with steaming, sweaty bodies, and almost impossible to get into, he writes. That manufactured hysteria was in turn in tune with the core ethos of Suede, a desire to transcend the everyday, to reach for the heightened state. Excellent article. And on that note, some links for you. David Lee Roth and his Just a Gigolo, I Ain't Got Nobody, Elton John, Benny and the Jets, which I love, Madness, It Must Be Love, Blondie, my favourite is Union City Blue, the Rolling Stones, Miss You. And then, of course, took me to Ozymandias for some reason. King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. There's always more to it. This is what history consists of. It is the sum total of the things they are telling us. Political reflections. I was referencing this article in my article, War on the Rocks, Make China Great Again, Xi's truly grand strategy. To the extent that any nation has a grand strategy, China surely does. The vision is no secret. Xi Jinping vows to make China great again. China's strategy has a broadly defined arc that the United States should address with a strategy of competitive coexistence to safeguard American interests sustainably amid increasing Chinese assertiveness. At the 19th century Chinese Communist Party National Congress, at the 19th Chinese Communist Party National Congress on October 18th, Xi delivered a major speech in which he declared the Chinese nation has stood up, grown rich and is becoming strong. He articulated a new era with the historic mission to realize the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation. By the People's Republic of China centenary in 2049, China should have resolved the Taiwan question and be a strong country with world-class forces. To understand how Xi's grand strategy might play out and to assess its prospects, one should consider Xi's hierarchy of geographically rooted national security priorities. Save for the party's self-justified dictatorship since 1949, this hierarchy arguably echoes across centuries of Chinese imperial history. From their very origins, the party established in 1921 and its People's Liberation Army established in 1927 have pursued political, security and geostrategic goals in layers. In descending order of importance, party leadership, centralized administration of the core Han heartland, stability of ethno-religious borderlands, integrity of land borders and security of coastlines, resolution of near-seas sovereignty claims and safeguarding of overseas interests. The party has staked its claim to power on its ability to safeguard the most important of these interests and rejuvenate China in a way that no other government could. The party army struggled for over 2 decades before finally becoming the party-state army that founded a People's Republic charged with reinvigorating China. Mao Zedong articulated and implemented a strategy of asymmetric protracted war in which time and territory could be traded for attrition of enemy forces and accrual of popular support. By early 1949, the party controlled most of the core Han heartland, ensuring its victory in the Civil War. On October 1st, 1949, Mao assumed power in the historical capital of Beijing, formally institutionalizing the party-state army. Party-army captured the Chinese state set the stage for achieving the next layer of security, party-state administration of the core Han heartland. While there is no chance today of Tibet, Xinjiang, or any other minority borderland succeeding from China, ethnic tensions and opposition to governance approaches are prompting Beijing to devote tremendous surveillance and security resources to these areas. Talks about Sino-Russian boundary agreements culminating in a 2008 treaty where Beijing acquiesced to Moscow's historical acquisition of thousands of square kilometers of Chinese-claimed territory to settle dispute over the world's longest land border. In 1950, the army recaptured Hainan Island. Mao even imposed a retrograde approach of luring the enemy in deep, although this and related initiatives furthered his own political purposes without strategic soundness. China's 1988 military strategy instead emphasized China's southern coastline and the South China Sea. China's navy has clashed with the Vietnamese counterpart on the Spratly Islands. Taiwan Strait crises erupted in 1954, 55, 1958, 1995, 1996. Today, a Taiwan contingency is the Army's lead planning scenario. Military strategies of 1993, 2004, and 2014 focus geographically on Taiwan, its surroundings, and emphasize achieving the jointness and technological sophistication necessary to prevail in a contingency there, potentially involving the US military. Years of Chinese progress have left Taiwan's forces in a position of gross quantitative inferiority. Respective qualitative advantage now varies by area, with army-favored areas growing. Cold War Hong Kong literally underwrote party survival as the single largest contributor of foreign exchange to China, estimated at over £173 million in 1966. Portugal offered to return Macau in 1985, but Beijing deferred to avoid preempting Hong Kong's return. Beijing now controls Macau tightly, but is having more difficulty consolidating its control over Hong Kong, given rising local opposition, conditions that fuel concern in Taiwan. Unresolved near-sea sovereignty claims are now a major Chinese focus. Beijing has some form of dispute with all 8 of its maritime neighbors, counting Taipei. And then talking about Senkaku Dayu, East China Sea delimitation claims, multifarious South China Sea features and maritime claims encompassed by the 9-dash line. Short-term upsides and long-term downsides characterize China's trajectory. With its disciplined hierarchy of national security priorities, China's leadership has picked its battles literally and figuratively. Unlike Imperial Germany and Japan, it has not truncated its rise with ruinous wars. Washington disperses its focus and forces globally. Beijing is making the near seas its current lair of military emphases to formidable effect. Yet slowing may remain underappreciated, particularly in a society where nobody under 40 has experienced national economic setbacks. In area after area, China has made rapid achievements by picking low-hanging fruit during catch-up growth fueled by societal striving following Maoist malpractice. Now citizens' expectations are far greater and incremental progress far harder and more expensive. Taking military technology and personnel to the next level entails great effort, yet diminishing returns. Warships built rapidly now will require massive overhauls a decade hence. The cost of sea power far outpaces inflation. There is a reason that very few nations maintain a blue water navy. Time will tell whether China can continue rapid progress into the far seas, but history and economics suggest that a slowdown looms. Leninist China, so comprehensively guided by Xi, is brittle and highly vulnerable to domestic instability. Xi has reverted to a winner-takes-all system in which the paramount leader monopolizes decision-making and responsibility. Should economic growth continue slowing and other problems emerge, Xi may come under tremendous pressure. Once Xi becomes sick, old, or dies, various interests within China will likely have a weakened institutional ability to deal with the distribution of interests and managing factional rivalry. That may mean great instability and uncertainty within China, which may cause it to release political pressure through regional aggression. The United States and others should prepare for a less stable China, as well as one that lashes out externally even more. For now, Xi is able to pursue a grand strategy predicated on a progressive radiating of Chinese power and prestige. Beijing's current area of focus, China's maritime periphery, is a zone of overlapping Sino-American interests and activities. Since the US and China have tremendous interest in avoiding war, yet feel increasingly threatened by each other regarding self-defined vital interests, the author maintains that both nations must pursue some sort of competitive coexistence. Washington must hold off Beijing's irredentism until slowing in Chinese national power growth combined with domestic demands reprioritizes policies towards peacefulness. In addition to its own unparalleled strengths, America has a unique array of allies and partners for burden sharing and force multiplication. It must leverage this advantage to safeguard its interests against Chinese pressure. Only then can all the necessary numbers truly add up. 5th of March, I wrote about how China has unveiled a digital Panopticon in Xinjiang. 21st of October, I was saying that digital Panopticon is a modus operandi which is running on empty. China turned 70. I spoke of how longing is on a large scale, makes history, which seems to be the Chinese approach. 27th of May, in one fell swoop, Xi Jinping was president for life. He put himself on a pedestal, which seems to be something that this author is talking about. I see war is eventually coming. Tariff wars, who blinks first, I've asked. Xi is building an algorithmic society. Unity is iron and steel. Unity is a source of strength. Complete reunification of the motherland is an inevitable trend. No one and no force can ever stop it, he added. The folks in Hong Kong whom Xi is seeking to unmask so he can exercise algorithmic control over them are in open rebellion. To wit, look at this video from Demosisto. It's not an action to disperse protesters but human hunting. Video press com. Joshua Wong has said Hong Kong ist das neue Berlin. The Chinese dream, I wrote, has become a nightmare at the boundaries of the Han Empire. China, on 26th of August, struck back at Trump. Zero Hedge has a very interesting article about whether China is just taking the proverbial. I'm sure Hong Kong and Taiwan are seen by Xi like a virus, and he's looking to impose a quarantine just like he's imposed on Xinjiang. This photo of faith leaders praying for Trump has become an instant meme. He's officially appointed his spiritual advisor and prosperity gospel pastor, Paula White, to a White House position. China, Wang Yi said, will not interfere in the internal affairs of the US, and we trust that the American people will be able to sort out their own problems. That's where tremendous leverage was lost by the Americans, I think. Pretty striking graphic result of the UK's 2017 general election by party, with constituencies ordered by poverty. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Trails of death and destruction, ideologically infected human souls, biologically perverted children, President Bolsonaro. The new economy of anger, the top 10 weakest growth by country, Venezuela minus 35%, Libya minus 19.1%, Iran minus 9.5%, Zimbabwe minus 7.1%, Nicaragua minus 5%, Equatorial Guinea minus 4.6%, Argentina minus 3.1%, Sudan minus 2.6%, Ecuador minus 0.5%, and Angola minus 0.3%. A YouGov survey for the Sunday Times found that the UK Labour has gained 6 points between Wednesday and Friday. Corbyn's party is now on 27%, 12 points behind the Tories. I expect Corbyn to get much, much closer. For all of you who've asked to hear the recording of the phone call here between Boris Johnson and Jarish Guppy, whom I knew, and his brother I knew even better, have a listen to this link, which is going to be problematical for Boris. Sterling, this is a chart from FX Pit Titan, 129.35. I think on balance we're going to pop over 130. Currency markets, euro dollar 111.70, dollar index 97.199, Japanese yen 108.28, Swiss franc 0.9863, the pound 129.38, the Australian 0.6924, I'm bullish about that, Indian rupee 70.66, South Korean won 1159.375, Rial 399.04, Egyptian pound 16.126, and the rand is at 1480, getting a feel-good bounce. This is a dollar index chart from Simple Trends. Must hold spot for the dollar. Breakdown would be a big deal. I think the top is in. Euro dollar, this chart is from FX Pit Titan. I think we're headed higher on the euro. Apple and Microsoft are up 65% year to date within this custom index. Both have attributed over 35% of the total return this year in the NASDAQ. That's from Tommy Thornton. There's narrow attribution at times, and then there's this, and he's right. Apple extended negative divergence, channel resistance ahead, risk of pullback correction according to Northman Trader. Commodity markets, gold lost at 15, 13, 40, and I think headed higher. Saudi Aramco, wholly owned by the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, well, the selling shareholder, announced yesterday an intention to proceed with an IPO on the main market of Tadawul. Operating cash flow for the year ended 31st December 2018, $121 billion. Free cash flow, $85.8 billion. Net income, $111.1 billion. Gearing, just 2.4%. The world's most profitable company pumps 10% of the world's oil, generated net income of $111 billion more than Apple, Google and ExxonMobil combined. World's biggest IPO, bankers have told Saudi government that investors will likely value the company at around 1.5 trillion, below the 2 trillion valuation that NBS was keen on. The kingdom will allow foreign non-resident investors to buy Aramco shares. Amina Bakar. Crude oil chart, huge move, yes, on Friday. We're currently at $56.12. I think we'll have a little bit of a pullback, but we keep an eye on that. And the Saudis probably want a little bit higher ahead of the IPO. Plane loads of cash from Russia have been shipped to Venezuela. Hundreds of millions of dollars in cash has been shipped from Russia to Venezuela, providing a lifeline to the South American country as US sanctions limit its access to the global financial system. Very interesting article giving amounts. What's interesting, of course, it's dollars and euros that are being shipped. And as I said in August 2018, Trump seems to be relishing his financial warfare strategies. And I said Venezuela was at the edge. There is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. As Argentina careens towards a default, investors are paying a premium for bonds they think will give them more negotiating power. Argentina's debt is now trading at about 40 cents on the dollar. Remember that century bond which was oversubscribed? Well, it's about 40 cents on the dollar now. African leaders call on Arab investors to rival Chinese and Russians. So far, we're not real partners. We have to restore old business ties. There are many opportunities that offer mutual prosperity and enable us to move forward as our parents and grandparents did. Uhuru Kenyatta at a session entitled The Future of Business in Africa within the FII Forum. Can't you see what the Chinese and Russians saw? Africa is a land that's transforming, evolving and changing. It is a continent that seeks to overcome conflicts, offer investment opportunities, and end corruption altogether. Let us be able to collaborate with each other as developers and partners. We have cultural similarities with Saudi Arabia and the world. So quite an interesting series of comments. I take you back to President Putin. Our Africa agenda is positive and future-oriented. We do not ally with someone against someone else, and we strongly oppose any geopolitical games involving Africa, he said. President Mnangagwa and President Lungu are seen attending Masisi's inauguration in Botswana in this photograph from Zim today. Moody's cut its outlook for South Africa's Baa3 rating from stable to negative, leaving the debt of Africa's most industrialized nation on the brink of junk status. It warned that failure by President Ramaphosa's government to fix slowing economic growth and rising debts may soon lead to a downgrade to junk. It trades as junk already, so it's really a bit of a technical issue when Moody's decide to downgrade it, but when they do, it will mean there'll be a big flight out of South African assets. Charlie Robertson pronounced that South Africa is heading for a junk downgrade, and of course the purest proxy for the China, Asia, EM and frontier markets feedback loop phenomenon is the South African rand in my view, but we've had a little bit of a bounce here. 1480, that's on the feel-good of the Rugby World Cup and the fact that it wasn't downgraded to junk. South African all shares up 7.42% year to date. Dollar rand feel-good rebound 14.82, but still in that 1450, 1550 range we've been in for a while. EGX30 is up 12.17%. Tanzania, look at this footage that Ahmed Nasir tweeted of a cabinet meeting in Tanzania. I like this photograph from the Hayward Gallery, Tabiso Sekgala. I thought it was very beautiful. The Financial Times had a series of articles, but let me first start with David and D. Nowhere refers to Duka Moja, literally meaning one shop, a sleepy trading centre on the Mai Mahiu Narok Road where the railway line comes to an abrupt end. Duka Moja lies about 20 kilometres beyond the last train station at Suswa, a slightly busier cattle market about 5 kilometres down the highway turn-off at Mai Mahiu. There is little to take commuters there unless one is a cattle trader. Naivasha town, which would be the destination for commuters, is a good 30 kilometres by road from the train station at Suswa, but only an hour and a half's drive from Nairobi. There being no station at Dukamoja means that the stretch will lie unused until Phase 2B is built, if it ever is. The entire Phase 2A extension is an economic puzzle. The bulk of the cargo that comes through the port of Mombasa is either destined for Nairobi or in transit to Uganda and beyond. In 2018, the port handled 21.8 million metric tons of dry cargo, of which 9.6 million tons, 44%, was transit cargo. This suggests only two logical destinations for rail freight, Nairobi and Malabar. After offloading Nairobi, the only other logical line for rail freight is one that serves transit cargo terminating at Kisumu or Malabar, as the case may be. And then he's given a very in-depth article, and this goes back to Xi Jinping at FOCAC in 2018 when he said it's the end of vanity. And I said it is a substantive linguistic recasting of China-Africa by Xi Jinping. There is no more Chinese money coming now for this railway. And that took me back to Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things, yet to be among those who come after. It seems to me that we're at a pivot moment, and we can keep regurgitating the same old mantras like a stuck record. And if we do that, this turns Ozymandias. Frankly speaking, in 2022, the election could be a boardroom decision with very little left to the voters to decide. Financial Times. Very hagiographic articles that they put in there. FDI rebounded by more than a quarter from 2017 to 1.6 billion. Inflation dropped to 4.7%. Kenyatta's government has sought to shift public spending away from the large infrastructure projects that have characterized much of the past decade. The opposition is dead here, says MP Omboko Milemba. When Odinga was the doyen of the opposition, he would check the government of the day on corruption and all issues. Now that he's in government, there are no checks. The country was burning, so I think the handshake was a good thing, but it will also be driving Kenya into a one-party state. Mobile savvy Kenyans will soon be able to buy shares on their phone. Kenya's stock market is going digital and diversifying as it seeks to attract new investors to offset declining share values, global anxiety over emerging and frontier market risk and a dearth of IPOs. Founded in 1954, the NSE is one of the oldest stock exchanges in sub-Saharan Africa, after Johannesburg in South Africa and Harare in Zimbabwe. Value of equities traded in the first 8 months of 2019 was down 23% as foreign investors on whom the NSE relies for more than half of its trading activity followed global trends and pulled funds from emerging and frontier markets. Emma Kibo raised $9.6 million, who registered interest from more than 500,000 citizens. That's 500,000 people who previously had no idea what a bond is. Other new asset classes include a derivatives market launched in July, 8 years in the making. Kenya is awash with green financing opportunities. NSE has had no IPO since 2015, compared with 8 between 2006 and 2011. Vulture Fund flies to the rescue of Kenya's birds. Financial Times: on a windswept mound on the edge of the Rift Valley, 2 Kenyan bird spotters lift binoculars to their eyes. A tawny eagle circles on the thermal currents above their heads. They check the time, estimate the bird's altitude, and note the approximate flight pattern. The men, Sylvester and David, are avid ornithologists, but this is not a hobby. They work for Kipeto Energy, an ambitious wind power project 50 kilometers southwest of Nairobi that is seeking to advance Kenya's move to renewable power while protecting the fauna for which the East African country is so well known. This is pioneering stuff, says Michael Turner. 30 spotters will monitor birds' flight paths and will order a turbine to be shut down if one is at risk of a collision. Kenya has the 3rd highest negative overall fiscal balance in sub-Saharan Africa in 2019 at minus 7.4% of GDP. That's from Mir. Elliot Kipchoge, he was at Nike, New York. Yield on the 10 and 30-year Eurobond are at 6.4 and 7.8% respectively. Kenya shilling is appreciated by 0.7% against the dollar during October. NSE during the month of October, equities market was on upward trend. All share up 9.7%, NSE 20 up 8.8%, NSE 25 up 13%. This was all because of the rally in large cap banking stocks, where NCBA was up 30.7%, equity up 24.2%, KCB up 23.2%. Trades at a PE, the all share of 12.2. WPP Scan Group announced it's disposing of Kantar Holdings, along with Millward Brown, Nigeria, West Africa and East Africa. That's going to bag them 5 billion shillings, $50 million, and they're going to distribute about 40% of the proceeds as a special dividend. Share price surged on Friday. Thank you for stopping by.